is day 0 of CES. The show officially starts tomorrow, but today is when a lot of the pre-news briefings happen. We've got some news items for you coming up on the GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti and laptops FreeSync version 2. There's some new peripherals from Logitech and HyperX, the Kingston division. Before getting to that, this coverage is brought to you by Thermaltake and their Core P1 TG Mini ITX chassis, which is wall mountable like the P3. Click the link in the description below for more information. So at 9 a.m. yesterday, while posting the Intel Kaby Lake 7700K and the Z270 motherboard reviews, NVIDIA decided to push out a before then silent announcement on the 1050 and 1050 Ti in notebooks. This is one that we've all been waiting for at this point because it was clearly going to happen, and the 1050 and 1050 Ti make a whole lot of sense in a notebook. Obviously, we'll have to test it and review it, but on paper, it sounds good. So they announced this around the same time Intel's Kaby Lake products left embargo and NDA, and the main news here is that, like the previous desktop GPUs in a laptop, these are the same GPUs. It's still GP107, just like in desktops. The only difference here is that there is an increase in memory capacity. So VRAM goes from 2 gigabytes on the 1050 in desktops, a hard 2 gigabyte limit, to 4 gigabytes maximally on laptops. It can be 2 or 4. And then the 1050 Ti is the same memory capacity, but has some differences in the clock rate. And that's primarily on the Ti version because it goes about 200 megahertz higher than the technical reference clock of the 1050 Ti, even though there were no actual reference cards to the 1050 Ti. Clock goes up about 200 megahertz, something like 1493 boost, or base rather, and about 1620 boost for the clock rate on the 1050 Ti. The 1050 is also 1493 push, so it's a bit higher, not as impressive as the 1050 Ti. But that's what we know so far for the NVIDIA new GPUs and notebooks. They will be available in Q1 of 2017, so it's pretty soon, and all the major vendors are pushing them already. We don't have hard prices for individual notebooks yet, but we know that they should start, big key phrase there for any manufacturer, at $700. Now, of course, where they actually will land, maybe a bit more than that, but as far as laptops with a modern Pascal GPU, that's certainly the cheapest out there right now. As for AMD news, the biggest piece right now is FreeSync version 2. We'll be meeting with AMD this week, a bit later, and at that point, we'll be able to look at the monitors in person, see what the real differences are, hopefully talk about some other subjects that may be coming up during CES. But for what I have right now, FreeSync version 2, basically the GPU, a Radeon GPU, as they've specified it, can handle the tone mapping on behalf of the monitor. So rather than this action occurring on the display and creating some amount of latency, it is now pushed and deferred to the GPU, which is a bit faster at it because it's a GPU, and that's kind of what it does. So you reduce latency, in theory. We'll have to try it in person to really know, but tone mapping is handled in that regard. So ultimately what's going on is the GPU talks to the monitor, gets the luminance, the color space, and things like that, and calculates it for it. In storage news, Kingston's Data Traveler Ultimate GT 2 terabyte USB key has been announced. So this is not an SSD, it is a USB key, and this is something that they did a year or two ago with the 1 terabyte drive. Made a lot of noise then, so of course they've doubled it. Other than that, it's not too exciting. This is a USB 3.1 Gen 1 spec, and side note here, technically what we know as USB 3.0 does not really exist anymore. It's now being referred to as USB 3.1 Gen 1. So this is not the 10 gigabit per second speed that you would associate usually with USB 3.1. It's the older speeds, slower, so it's closer to 5 gigabits per second. So nothing special in terms of speed, just capacity, 2 terabytes, somewhat special in its own right. It's a big block. We don't know the price. I can tell you now that the 1 terabyte model is selling on Newegg for about $2,000 and on Amazon for about $2,800. So this will be a bit more than that. While we're on the topic of Kingston, their HyperX division, or sort of a side company now at this point, has announced the Pulsefire mouse. They've got an updated version of the Alloy keyboard that we saw at PAX. So that was the FPS Alloy then. Now there's the Alloy RGB. You guessed it. And it's got RGB LEDs. So that's the keyboard. It's just got LEDs in it. The mouse we'll talk about more once we see it in person. The RAM is kind of worth mentioning. That's the Predator Rgb Memory. Again, big surprise, but this one at least is communicating with motherboards. So that is somewhat unique in that the Predator RGB kit can talk to Asus, Gigabyte, and MSI RGB boards So that would be things like the Aorus boards and the Mystic Lighting boards from MSI, and synchronize with those LEDs, which is worth mentioning because kits like Vexor's memory, although cool, function completely independently and don't really synchronize with the LEDs on the boards. And finally, Logitech just today announced their G533 headset, which if you take the G633 and G933 that we've previously covered, it's basically the same thing. They've made a few changes, but the core heart of the headset remains the same. It's the same Pro G drivers and same wireless functionality as the G933. A few things here. The G533 is a $150 MSRP, so that puts its launch MSRP $50 below the G933's launch MSRP, which sounds great because it's $50 less, $150 versus $200. But if you look on any retailer right now, the G933 is available for $150. And this is a consistent problem with Logitech where they take these products that are new and maybe reimagined would be the best word, but their older products, which are still perfectly fine, are often available for cheaper or at least the same price. We saw this with the Prodigy series headsets, where the G400 series headsets were available for about $20 less than the Prodigy version of those headsets. What then does the G533 change? Well, where most companies are taking products, shoving RGB LEDs into them and calling them new products, Logitech's gone the other way. With the G933, they took the LEDs out and they created the G533. So it is an LED-less headset. We have now gone full circle. And to the same sort of end, there's a few other features removed. There's buttons that have been taken off of the 533 from the 933. It's been simplified overall in terms of the chassis and all the stuff that's on it and that you can interact with. And they now have rechargeable and swappable batteries, which is probably the most significant item of difference between the two. And other than that, there's not a whole lot of difference between the 533 and the 933. Price is the same. Wireless range should be more or less the same. The chassis looks a little bit different as well, but we'll have to get hands-on to really figure out if that's relevant and if it's resolved some of the headset sliding forward issues that we had originally when reviewing the G633. So that pretty much covers the basics. That's the Logitech news and all the other stuff before it. If you have any questions about what's going on with this news for the week, hit the link in the description below because that has our news items rounded up by Patrick Lathan, Ryan Greenberg, Eric Hamilton, everyone else working at the site. As always, subscribe for the rest of the CES coverage. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.